Over the last few years, my cooking practice has changed pretty dramatically. And to be honest, cooking used to be a lot more fun because I had time to just experiment in the kitchen and try new things and just mess around. Whereas now, cooking is much more survivalistic, putting food on the table for myself and my family. But the truth is, that's what being a pro home cook is all about. It's the consistency. It's showing up day after day, no matter what the circumstances are, to really connect to the food that you are consuming. And this week I wanted to try something a little bit different, which is take you behind the scenes on what a week in my life actually looks like. These are not recipes or meals that I've been planning out or testing to be in a video. I'm gonna be showing you a week in my life as I cook every single meal completely from scratch for my entire family. So my cooking journey started last Sunday, right after Thanksgiving, which was a nice time to just cleanse things up a little bit and challenge myself. And when I say challenge, I mean just upping the stakes a little bit, because in my normal life, my normal cooking practice, I'm making around 90 to 95% of the meals completely from scratch. My wife will cook some meals. We'll get takeout 1 to 2 times a week. But this week I'm going all in, 100% of the meals, everyone's accounted for with these hands right here. So Sunday morning, right when I woke up, I made a quick oatmeal for breakfast, which everyone in my family likes. And just a quick note, I have an 8-month-old baby and a 2.5-year-old toddler. You'll see their meals sprinkled in throughout the week, but I can tell you one thing, that everything they're eating is still gonna be made from scratch in my kitchen. So back to the oatmeal. This is actually a water-based oatmeal that you dress up afterwards. So it's just a 2-to-1 ratio of oats to water, and I'll cook that down until it's thick. And then basically I just chopped up whatever remaining fruit I had in the house. And the idea is that with all that sugar in the fruit, it kind of carries through the oatmeal and you don't need additional sugar. And I just topped that with some coconut flakes as well for a little bit of texture, which is just a nice quick hack. And for the little one, I took the oatmeal and I actually mashed in some raspberries, and she gets a side of kiwi, which she literally just inhaled straight to the face. And my 2-year-old, she actually got some Dutch baby leftovers that I had in the fridge with a side little fruit cup. And when everyone is accounted for and fed in the morning, my wife and I will generally have some type of caffeine, and it switches between tea, matcha, or coffee. In this case, we had some nice matchas, and once we enjoyed those, it was cleanup. And this is the aftermath of when a baby eats. We use a technique called baby-led weaning, where the baby feeds themselves. It looks like a straight up food fight every single time they eat a meal. And since Sunday's the big meal prep day, I like to make a list with all the things that I want to make, because I like the action of making them and then checking them off the list. Things were kind of low at this point in the pantry and the fridge, so I headed out on a little shopping journey with my daughter. And first we hit the garden at the studio, which is basically at its very end of the season. Things are starting to frost up, but I was able to get a nice harvest of a bunch of greens and root veggies for the week. And then we went on to the local market, which I picked up some pantry items and then some other proteins to kind of fill in the gaps. When I got home, I whipped up a little lunch slash brunch, you could call it. I fried up some greens from the garden with some garlic. Then I fried up some eggs with a little bit of fresh chev that I had. I was so hungry and kind of rushing, so this is a lazy scramble right here. I just whisk all of the ingredients up in the pan while it's frying. Then to bring it together, I served a little bit of sauerkraut, some toasted sourdough slices, and it needed some more flavor. So I actually had some pesto that I made from the week before that had a bunch of parsley in it, a few different types of nuts, some spicy peppers, and I just popped that on the plate, and that worked out really well. Now, after I digested and hung out a little bit, back to the meal prep. I chopped up some sweet potatoes, coated them in oil, and air fried them for about 15 minutes. Both of my kids love sweet potato fries just straight up, but I can also throw these in various dishes throughout the week for the adults. Next for the prep was the protein. I had a few chicken breasts that I sliced up into pieces, and I'm turning half of them into chicken fingers for my daughter, and the other half, well, I had a little bit of that tandoori chicken marinade, if you remember from the pizza oven video that I just released. Just a little bit extra of that I threw into the chicken, and I just let that marinate overnight with the goal of turning that into a meal for the next day. And here are those chicken fingers that I made with cornflakes. And once that prep was done, I started wrapping my head around dinner, and I decided I was gonna make a noodle soup, which to be honest is probably like 50% of my dinners, especially when it starts getting cold. And I had bought a block of tofu at the market earlier, so I figured I would cube it up and air fry it for the soup, but also I would have these crispy tofu pieces to use in different meals throughout the week. Now here's where things took a little bit of a turn. I had some fresh turmeric from the farmer's market, so instantly a Japanese ramen was out of the picture. So I shifted more towards the Southeast Asian direction. So I chopped up some turmeric with some scallions and some garlic and fried that up in some beef fat that I had to build a nice aromatic base. Then I added some chicken stock, some coconut milk, and some water. And I had some shiitake mushrooms that are a bit dried up in the fridge. So I sliced them up, added them to the soup to hydrate and really add a nice umami flavor bomb to the broth. And I let that simmer for about 5 minutes. And at this point, I was in a nice cooking flow. So I was just pulling things out of the fridge to use up. And I had some brown rice, so I added some of that coconut milk and a little maple syrup and just made a nice little coconut rice pudding for dessert. And once the soup was where I wanted it, I chopped up some bok choy from the garden and added that in there, cooked it for another minute, poured it over some rice noodles, added the crispy tofu. I had some turmeric flavored pickled radish actually in the kitchen. That was a nice addition. And then some fresh scallion. And my kids are not on this level yet, so they were on their own with their meals for dinner. And then after we put the kids to sleep, I was back at it with more meal prep. And for me, anytime I have a baked good for the week, I'm always gonna be in better shape because everyone likes that in my family. So I whipped up some gluten-free banana batter, roughly guided by a recipe I found on the internet. And then I added some zucchini and walnuts and baked those off. And that came out great. And I was super pumped to wake up to these fresh muffins in the morning. All right, so mornings for me during the weekdays are generally a bit insane because I've got like 30 to 45 minutes to make food for the whole day while getting my kids ready, feeding them. It's just pure insanity, but I've learned to work with it. So first I made a smoothie with some greens, a little frozen fruit, some milk kefir that I fermented, and a little bit of almond milk. Then I immediately started frying up that chicken that I marinated the day before. And while that was frying, I prepared a salad base to go with the chicken, which was some assorted greens from the garden, some daikon and carrot from the garden, and a little bit of cheese. Then I chopped up this leftover flatbread that I had in the fridge to turn into croutons, and you can see this chicken is looking fantastic. So when I took that out, I added the bread and just fried that up in the residual flavor until it was crispy. I chopped up a few of those chicken pieces, and I actually had some leftover for the following day, which is always nice. And I added that with the croutons to the salad, and I had a little vinaigrette from last week, just about 1 dose of this, and I poured that over the salad and mixed that up and packaged that up for the day. And finally, after a little intensive morning there, I went straight into coffee time. And I would say my #1 drink of choice, especially when it's colder, is an Americano with some steamed milk. So we had a nice coffee time with those muffins from the night before. Glorious. Now, when I got to the studio for the day, I took a little rummage through the freezer because I knew I needed some more protein for the week. And I found this nice skirt steak from Porter Road. So I enjoyed that salad for lunch. And when I got home, I whipped up a quick pasta, just using up random things I had in my fridge. I first added some onions and bell peppers and I sauteed that in a pan. When my water was simmering, I blanched some kale in there from the garden and took that out after just about a minute. And when the onions and peppers were perfect, I added a little bit of red wine that I had left over in the fridge from the weekend, some chicken stock, and I just let that simmer and reduce. Then I got the noodles going in the same pot that I had the kale in. I'm using some gluten-free noodles here. And once the noodles were done, I added some to a separate pot to make the girls just a more plain pasta. And the rest I popped into the sauce. And just to finish everything off, I used that same pesto I had from the day before to hit it with some extra flavor. And I chopped up that blanched kale, added that, and cooked all of that pasta into the sauce to really thicken it up. And finally hit it with some grated pecorino. And I mean, a flavor-packed veggie pasta is just always gonna do the trick for me. And I don't think we had any leftovers there. I think we ate all of that. And for anyone who feels a little overwhelmed by freestyle cooking like this, I created the Pro Home Cook's Ultimate Veggie Guide to be a companion to help you put your veggies to use. So if you want a free PDF download of this, just click the link below in the description. So we're on to Tuesday morning, and the first thing I did when I woke up was work on that skirt steak because I was thinking about it and was staring me in the face when I opened the fridge. So I first cut it in half, I dried it off with some paper towels, and I had this harissa harissa spice that my parents actually got me from some recent travels. So I added that spice mix along with salt on both sides. And then I just sliced off that little end piece right there so it could fit on a plate. And I let that sit in the fridge overnight to just get a slight cure and marinate with all those spices. And once that was done, I moved on to lunch, which was basically the same exact salad that I had the day before since I already had the leftover chicken. So you don't really need to know all the details here. Honestly, I make some type of salad for about 50% of my lunches, and I'm just using fresh things that I have on hand. And this time I didn't have a dressing, so I just squeezed on some lemon, a little bit of balsamic, a little honey, and some oil, and just gave that a mix, and that was a lunch for the day. And this is me trying to make a smoothie while my daughter demands I draw one of her stuffed animals, and my other daughter just chows down on her breakfast. But I did get that smoothie done, and this one ended up coming out a little more thick, and I had a bit of a mini breakthrough here. I figured I would try to add some crunchies to the top for some texture. So I found some puffed rice in the fridge and served that up as more of a smoothie bowl, and my daughter absolutely loved it, which is a big win because that's a lot of nutrients and all of those hidden greens in there. And finally, after what was an insane morning, but honestly pretty standard, we got to enjoy some iced matchas. And here is my packed lunch for the day: some salad, some muffins, a smoothie bowl, and some snacks. Now, after my workday, I drove over to pick up my winter farm share. Shout out Sangley Farms in Long Island. This is basically a bag of local goodies, which I get on a Tuesday, and it's a really nice re-up of ingredients right in the middle of the week. So it was a bit of a rush night for dinner, but I did have a lot of stuff that I wanted to use up in the fridge. So I figured a soup would be a great way to do that. So I cut up some onions and some carrots, got those frying off as a base. Then I half boiled an egg. And in the meantime, I was air frying some of those nuggets for my daughter. And when that base was fried up in the soup, I added some chicken stock, a little soy, a little rice vinegar. And then I actually had some roasted cauliflower from the thumbnail that I took for the last video. And of course, that is not going to waste. So I just ripped some of that up and added it to the soup. And then finally, some top soy from my garden. And I just cooked that for about 30 seconds. I poured that over some rice noodles, added the egg, added some scallions, and boom. So this was almost a weird minestrone ramen, like East meets West. And to be honest, the execution wasn't the best, but hey, that's home cooking. It's gonna happen from time to time. It's still probably gonna be better than most restaurants out there. So finally, once the kids were asleep, I opened the fridge and boom, that steak was staring me in the face. And it was a reminder that I needed something to serve with it for the next day. So I had a bunch of herbs in the fridge that were gonna go bad. So I put some parsley, cilantro, green onion, and garlic in a food processor, chopped that up, added it to a bowl, added a bunch of lemon juice, some olive oil, salt and pepper, and I made this really nice chimichurri, which of course will pair perfectly with this steak. So Wednesday morning, I woke up a little bit before the kids, and instead of working out, which I normally do, I had to get straight to meal prep because things needed to get done. And since those acai bowls were such a hit, I wanted to make them again, but just improve on them a little bit. So I whipped up a homemade granola. But at this point, my mind was still focused, of course, on that beautiful steak. And it needed something else. So I had this Napa cabbage from the farm share. I sliced that right down the middle and chopped up half of it and got that caramelizing in a pan with some olive oil and some butter. And I actually started working out in between cooking here. When you've got little kids, you'll take anything you can get. And then I started making banana pancakes, which is when my little one woke up. So I got her, then back to the banana pancakes, which was just 2 bananas mashed, 2 eggs, some gluten-free flour, and a little baking soda. And these were super thick, so I actually added a little bit of almond milk and fried those up in some coconut oil. Everyone in my family absolutely loves these, including my youngest, who started eating solids like 2 months ago, but she'll eat like 4 or 5 of these pancakes at a time. It's insane. And then the last thing to prep in the morning was another smoothie. And then by this time, the granola came out of the oven and it was looking nice and pretty. So I jarred that up and went off to work. And I actually came back home to prepare the steak for lunch. So I got out a cast iron pan, preheated that, added some oil, threw in 1 piece of steak, saved the rest for tomorrow, gave it a hard sear on both sides. And at this point for lunch, I was kind of over salad. So I was trying to think of how I could shift it up a little bit. So instead of a salad, I just did some lettuce wraps with the lettuce I got in the farm share and just served that up with the chimichurri and the caramelized cabbage. And these things blew my mind. One of my favorite meals in a while, not to mention I could have the exact same thing the next day because I had all of the ingredients. And dinner that night was a bit crazy because I had to take my daughter to the doctor and we didn't have much time to actually make anything. So we really just snacked on a bunch of leftover sourdough, some cheeses, some different spreads and and jams, and it was fine. It got the job done. And then after that, the last thing I did was actually caramelize the second half of that Napa cabbage because I was so excited to eat the same steak wraps for lunch the following day. So Thursday, and this is generally the time of the week when I start burning out just a bit. Like I'm generally getting takeout Thursday night. I'm just done with cooking. But of course, because of this challenge, I was motivated to push through. So the first thing I cooked when I got up was the rest of that steak. And to take advantage of those pan drippings, I fried up some zucchini, which I thought would just add more veggies for those lettuce wraps. And I saw some coconut milk in the fridge left over from the soup I made the other day. So I figured I would use that before it went bad. And I made another oatmeal, which was 1 part oats to 1 part coconut milk to 1 part water and a little bit of cinnamon. And then I served that up with a bunch of fresh berries, some kiwi, and some apple. Plus we had some leftover pancakes for the kids, which made a really nice breakfast. So I was at the studio for lunch and I didn't have any greens on hand, so I just went out to the garden, sliced off some fresh lettuce, and went round 2 on those delicious lettuce steak wraps. So when I got home, my wife had actually prepared some lentils for my youngest daughter, and it actually inspired me to use those lentils and make a dal, to try something a little different for dinner. So I chopped up some random aromatics I had, some peppers, carrots, turmeric, garlic, and green onion, and I got that frying in a little bit of beef fat. When those aromatics were caramelized, I added some tomatoes and cooked that down a bit with a splash of wine that we were treating ourselves to. And I had the yellow lentils soaking in some water to hydrate them for about 15 minutes. I washed those off, popped those into the pot, added some veggie stock and some water, and just cooked that down for about 15 minutes. While that was cooking, I actually had some paneer cheese in the fridge, so I chopped it up and air fried it to get it nice and crispy. And you can see those lentils really broke down almost into a mush, which is what I was going for. And then I served that up with some sourdough slices and some chopped parsley. And this was a nice little Indian-inspired vegetarian dinner. All right, Friday morning, and the first thing I started cooking was a frittata, which was gonna be lunch for the day. And an excellent way, if you do have a bunch of eggs, to just use up produce that might be going bad soon. So I got some butter and oil in a pan. I fried up some bell peppers, and I added some green onions, and I had some leftover caramelized cabbage and zucchini from those lettuce wraps. So I dumped all of that in there. And then I scrambled up about 6 eggs with a little bit of milk, grated on some cheese and some chopped parsley. And while that was cooking, I actually started on a little sourdough scallion pancake, which I thought would be a nice side. So I just added my sourdough starter to a pan, added some scallions, fried that up on both sides. And then that frittata was ready to go into the broiler. I cook it on the bottom first, and then I hit it with that direct heat on the top. And at this point, I've mastered the technique. It comes out great every time. And then after that, I ended up frying up some more banana pancakes for the fam. And then I made another smoothie bowl. At this point, it was just like the week of smoothie bowls for some reason. So that was breakfast and lunch for the day. And when I got home, I made a pretty random dinner, which will definitely happen when you get deeper and deeper into the week. I fried up some yellow cauliflower that I had from the farm share. Then I had those leftover lentils that I served with the cauliflower. I fried up some of that paneer as well and served that with the rest of the chimichurri. And my review on this was, well, it fed us. It got the job done. And finally, Saturday, the last day of the challenge. And the night before, I had actually pulled a steak out of the fridge to defrost because I knew I had some quickly ripening avocados and I had some tortillas, so I was gonna make some type of Mexican feast. So what I did was salt and pepper both sides of the steak and just threw that in the fridge until lunch. And then for breakfast, once again, another smoothie bowl. And everything was kind of building towards this lunch. I wanted a celebratory meal from working so hard for the whole week. So the first thing I did was shredded up some purple cabbage. I also grated in some carrot, added some cilantro, lime juice, oil, and salt, and just made a nice little quick slaw. Then I had 2 ripey avocados, so of course I transformed that into some guacamole. And then I seared up that beautiful ribeye. And when that was done cooking, I took that out and added in some zucchini and some peppers just to take advantage of that pan flavoring and add some veggies to this meal. And then finally, I took some tortillas, and just like the last air fryer video, I chopped them up, air fried them for a nice little side tortilla chip that I could serve with everything. And since I had a more intensive prepared lunch, I knew the way I was gonna finish everything off was just a bread dinner, we'll call it. I'd been preparing 2 sourdough loaves for the last day and a half, and they were ready to go in the oven to be baked off, and I was gonna take full advantage of fresh sourdough straight out of the oven. So for dinner, pretty much my entire family just snacked on fresh bread with some some cheeses and some side condiments. Honestly, it felt like we were in France or something. And it was an excellent way to end off the challenge for the week. So boom, there you go. That is almost 84 meals for the week, something like that. I think what hit me from documenting all this is how much work it actually takes to feed a family and how I have to do that every single week for like the next 25 years or something. And then my kids just get bigger and eat more food. It's all insane. Cooking is more survivalistic now. It's just getting food on the table, but of course trying to make that enjoyable, trying to make it taste good. That has been the biggest shift in my cooking practice over the last few years, and I'm continuing to just accept that change, because any change in life is difficult, but that's just the name of the game. Everything is always changing. So hopefully you enjoyed this video, and there's more food inspiration coming soon.